Greg is an EO member from Huntsville, Alabama. He wrote the cash section of Scaling Up. And Greg, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yep. Yeah. I tell you, I have to endure my Crimson Tide not being in the championship this year, but we've had more time to read all the blogs about the quarterback room for next year. So, hey, we'll be back. So I appreciate the opportunity to come up here and chat with you guys. I've met a lot of you in various places throughout my EO travel. So, the first thing I always like to kind of share is, I'm kind of the EO poster child of, I'm the only EO member in Huntsville, Alabama, because there's not a chapter there. I originally got asked to, a client of mine from Huntsville had moved his business to Atlanta in 2001, calls me up one day and says, hey, I ran into this YEO group. I think you ought to come check it out. And it's like, really? It's a 4-hour drive to Atlanta, and it's like, yeah, okay, I'll come. I went to the first meeting. Actually, their speaker that night was Al Reese. He wrote the book 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. It was still a great book and still valid. Signed up on the spot, and at that point, we were doing about $1.3 million in revenue. Had another different partner at the time. A couple of years into that, we split, and then the two partners I have now, stayed. And so we went from being, essentially I had about $1 million of practice, value at the time. So today we actually got out of the valley of death. So we crossed the 5 million revenue mark this year. So we hit 5.2 million for the year. So we escaped the black hole, as I talk about in the first book. We made the Inc. 5000 list with purely organic growth, no acquisitions. I always like to gig my good buddy Mr. Bly about that. But it's one of those things that what I'm going to cover with you today is stuff that we've had to live. And I'll tell you, sometimes the toughest thing is to eat your own cooking. Because, man, I tell you, I know what it's like to be in the valley of death. I know what it's like to transition a business model that when we started $1 million of revenue just in Huntsville, Alabama, today, of that 5.2 million, 85% of that's not in Huntsville, Alabama. And it actually covers every time zone in the world. So we have clients as far away as Australia, we have clients in the Middle East, we have clients in Asia, we have clients all over the US, Canada, a couple in Latin America. And none of it, zero, would have happened without EO. None. And my challenge to you is it's what do you do to take advantage of this organization? Because I was driving 4 hours to Forum, 4 hours drive home, or 4 hours in Forum, then 4 hours drive home. So I don't care about any lame excuses about getting to Forum. I didn't miss a Forum meeting for 11 years. And only then it was because I transitioned to an Insignia Forum, and that went, and out of that, in that 11-year period, 3 of those I was on the global board from 06 to 09. And so it's what you put as a priority. And as we always say, it's what you put into it is what you get out of it. My kids didn't think what I did was cool until they started realizing that once I joined EO, they thought what I did was cool. And it had some pretty neat experiences of things that, they got to experience some international travel. I didn't have a passport until 2003. Went to my first international EO event, the Vancouver University. I think I've been to 42 countries since 2003. Almost all of it, probably maybe 4 of them were not EO related. I got the opportunity back in August. I did an East Africa, Middle East speaking tour. Went to Mauritius, Tanzania, Kenya, Jordan, and Saudi. And I'll tell you, I mean, entrepreneurism is entrepreneurism anywhere in the world. Now, there are some basic things, and we'll cover some of those today in the talk of understanding why is it an emerging market has a certain challenge versus what we are experiencing in the North American and especially the U.S. market. This is an unprecedented time in entrepreneurism that we have right now. So you better run hard and run fast. Nobody knows how long it's going to last. I think it's got some pretty good legs, but I tell you, the opportunities are totally off the chart right now. And the nice thing is I get to sit in a very unique piece of the world. I get to survey economic data every day at the detail level all across mostly North America and Canada. And like I said, a few places, and we got 3 or 4 clients in Australia. And it's sad to see what they're having to be challenged now with the natural disaster of the fires. But I'm telling you, the thing is you guys are challenged in this part because when you hear the news media talk about economic data, they don't know what they're talking about. And here's my treatise on why that is. How many of those people, whether it be government or news media, know your data? None. The IRS got your tax return back probably in October or September for your company. That's not analytical data. They haven't even looked at it yet. And that was for 2018. Nobody's seeing this data. The Federal Reserve does not see this data. They're guessing. They're using old economic models. There's a great article. I should add this to the slide deck. There's an article that just came out about a month ago that a buddy of mine, Rob Simons, who's a business coach, we swap a lot of data that we see in the marketplace and share these ideas. And you look at the decline of the public markets in terms of how many, the public markets have dropped in terms of total companies that are public. There's more companies that have gone private that have gone public in the last 10 years. We, in this room, are the dominant force of the U.S. economy. Same for Canada as well. And so you guys have an important place in history. You have an important place in being an organization like EO to really take advantage of the power of this group from your members in your forum, the members in your chapter, the strategic partners that you've been able to tap into and get better guidance and better leadership and better training and all of those things. But you better take advantage of it because there's other people out there that, they're going to be doing the same thing. But you've got 3 steps ahead of them, if you take advantage of what this organization, can deliver from both learning universities, regional events, international universities, the executive ed programs. How many in here have actually taken advantage of an executive ed program in EO? Okay, guys, you got to step up your game now. I'm telling you, of our executive ed program, starting with EMP, Entrepreneurial Master's Program, is the premier program. Every person who's attended EMP talks about the dramatic transformation of their business over that 3-year program. If you're not applying for EMP, actually the applications I think may have just closed. If they're still open, I'd still try to get in. But you've got to get in. You got to try to get into EMP. Now, I have a particular affinity for one class called EO at Horton because I get to chair that class. We've had we've done it 4 times. It's a high-level financial class, so you got to come into it with some financial understanding because it's MBA-level corporate finance. But we've sold out for our 5th year in a row, so that program will be in March. We got EO at Horton, or at Harvard. We've got the London Business School program, which is a great case study. It'll teach you how to think creatively and constructively about looking at case study data. You've got the Key Executive program, and I'm pretty fond, this hasn't officially been announced, but I'll tell you. So I'm doing a new 3-day executive ed program that'll be Functional Finance 101. So we're going to do that out in California. So it'll be a 3-day intensive entry level or basic level financial education where we're going to have everybody submit their data and put it in a working model for them to use in the class with the things that we'll be talking about today. And so that's we realized that we were missing that entry-level financial offering because some of the people that came to the Horton class with kind of a novice understanding of finance, their eyes were just rolling back in their head. They didn't even know where to start. So EO is doing tremendous effort, and if you're not taking advantage of this stuff, man, I'll tell you, you're missing out on some of the best education and training that's very focused, very intense, and very specifically directed to the world that you live in, being an entrepreneur, running a business, putting payroll on a credit card, trying to make things work. So that's my challenge to you guys to make it happen. All right, so this is my first book, Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits. I never thought I'd write a book, but thanks to people like Vern Harnish and Ron Hollis, who was the EO member that got me into EO to begin with, both of them challenged me saying, and I'll issue the challenge to you, if you think you know something unique that the world needs to know, you owe it to the world to write a book. It's not that hard to write a book, because if I can do it, I'm a chicken farmer from Alabama. I mean, so, I have a lot of subject-verb disagreements. That's what editors are for. So the process today is a lot less expensive than the process I did to do this one through Greenleaf Book Group. But my new book is about to come out, so it'll be out probably within a month or so. It's done. We're in the editing phase now. And so I learned a lot in doing the first one. If anybody has a passion about writing one, I'll be happy to share, my experience, what it's like. Here's the challenges. Here's the things that an illiterate chicken farmer, has to overcome to write a book in those things. But I do, when you put something in writing that's permanent, this thing doesn't go away. So I'm surprised we've sold over 50,000 copies, since it was released. And so I never had even thought 4,000 or 5,000 copies probably would have been, what I thought it might do. And it continues to sell today. To people, we get orders every week, for books from Amazon, and I go, I don't know who's buying it, but they are. So I have great hope for the next one. So we'll see. But it's not a novel, so trust me. So anyway, most of this material I'm going to cover today is out of the next book, and it builds on some of the ideas of the first one. The first book was largely written because of a series of talks that I gave after I got off the global board. When you serve on the global board, it's actually more weeks now, but in my last year, I spent 12 weeks away from the business in global board service. So when that global board term ended, what do you do with those 12 weeks? Well, I could go back and actually be billable, but I decided that I would work on what was then the accelerator program. We called it Money Day back then. We had really sucky content, and so that was kind of self-developed. So I said, okay, let me take a crack at this. And so I developed content for that Money Day program, and still develop content for Cash Day now, and some of that is my material as well. But essentially that was the framework, and I aimed it at accelerators. Now here's what I learned. So I did about 15 of the Accelerator Money Day classes that summer after I got off the board. And I realized that there were EO members showing up for those sessions as well. And the EO members got as much out of it as the accelerators. And so I really kind of look at the first book as largely focused to that $1 to $5 million business, but there's still basic principles that apply fairly high into the revenue size. It's what we built our consulting practice on. It's what led us to grow our firm and our practice to where we are today. What you're going to see now is everything that we've learned since then. This is what we apply every day in our consulting practice. And so these are kind of the basic rules that we believe in. Now, when you go to accounting school, they don't teach you to believe in anything. These are things I believe in because we see a lot of repetition, we see a lot of data, and we have pretty good proof as to why we think it's there. 3 simple rules for business success. And the first one is kind of strange coming from an accountant, but trust me, it's the absolute truth. You got to figure out what the market needs. And in doing so, it doesn't mean, do they need a widget? It may be, how do I sell them the widget? Do I service the widget? Do I create recurring revenue off the widget? Do I give them the first 2 years free and then try to charge them later? or, all of those things. It is as much the interaction with the customer, with the product or service that you're doing, that fulfills that market need as it is the price itself, in that process. So first and foremost, if you guys are struggling in your business, you've really got to go deep with this. Get with your forum, get with your business coach, if you're an accelerator, get with your accountability group, get with your accountability coach, and say, help, I'm too close to this. Give me some critical feedback of, am I solving a problem that needs to be solved? And does the market respect it? Now, understand, the whole market won't ever respect it from a price standpoint. Some will like it, some will not. Those people aren't your customers, so you start to really narrow down into who the world is of who you're working with in that process. But the second part is the part I love to figure out, is can I do it profitably? And, and so understand there's a couple of basic principles in terms of doing it profitably. How many of you in here bill on an hourly basis in terms of what you do? So a fair number. So one of the things I learned about billing on an hourly basis is it's not a good idea. So I can tell you that if you bill by the hour, there's only two possible economic outcomes. I either gave away my expertise or I charged for my ignorance. So which are you doing? And you're probably doing a little of both like we were. So everything we do today is fixed price, with the exception of some of our staff augmentation services that our accounting solution team does. But and even there, I've challenged that team to find ways that we can do those on a fixed price basis or do segments of them on a fixed price basis whenever possible. You can never achieve economic dominance, on an hourly basis. That's the bottom feeder of the billing methodologies, in that process. So, but in essence, finding a way to do it profitably is not taking the sum of the cost and adding 10% to them. That's where everybody starts, and I will tell you that's the last place you should start. You start with, what does the market think the value of this product or service is? What are they willing to pay? And what is that segment, that slice? So are you a Nordstrom customer or are you a Walmart customer? They have two different profiles. And there's an elbow in between that curve that says, here's a decent amount of people. That's kind of where I like to live, is in that elbow. I don't want to be the highest price and I don't want to be the lowest price. I want to find that opportunity to slide up and down that curve whenever I can in that process. But there's nothing wrong with being Nordstrom or Walmart. But you just better be comfortable with the consequences that comes with those market positions. But so once you really look at what does a reasonable number of customers are willing to pay for that product or service, then what are the have-tos? Not what I am spending, what if I start with a plain sheet of paper, what do I have to spend to deliver that in the most efficient way? And work at it and see, can that be exceptionally profitable in that process? Now, this last piece, this is why you go to EO Executive Ed programs. Because in my first year of chairing the Horton program, one of the great benefits I get is I get to sit in there. And I deliver a 4-hour segment of the content, but after that they're like letting real professors do it, so they let this chicken farmer kind of hang out and talk a little bit, but it's mostly 4 days of real professors talking. So David Wessels, who's our lead professor, he's talking about return on invested capital. And I'm sitting in the back of the room going, I did that calculation back in college. Can't say I've ever done it in practice. Now, you notice I've been in practice a while. There's some gray hair here. So it's like, that's interesting. Now, he's only talking about public companies. Here's the thing you have to understand about academia. The only data they have are public companies. How relevant is that to your world? Like zero, for the most part. Yeah, it's some relevance, but so anyway, so he goes through it, but I get this thinking of going, I need to go look at this. I even pitched to David. I said, well, hey, I have access to all this private company data, and would you be interested in studying this for private companies? And I realized something pretty quick. College professors don't do anything unless you pay them. And I didn't have any money to pay him at that time, so it's like, okay, so I'll just study it myself. And I'll tell you, it just blew me away. And what we really learned was now, in the first book, I gave you an observational profit target of 5% is on life support, 10% is good, 15% is great. But the problem was that only worked for about 70% of the businesses. There were 30% or so that I had to modify that. I had to tweak that a little bit. And largely because you guys are so hung up on revenue that revenue is the most worthless number on your P&L. I mean, it's a glamour show, and I'll show you what the right number is to look at. So I had to always make some modifications for those kind of showy businesses that were passing through a bunch of stuff. And so, but as we studied this return on invested capital, I realized that today, if we took your data and broke it down, I would establish your minimum profit target based on a targeted amount of return on invested capital, of the capital that you have to put into your business to turn over working capital and fixed assets and all of those things and have cash in the business. What should that number be? So here's the question. What's that minimum? What should that minimum target be? What do you think it is? 15? I got a 20. Got a 20? Anybody got a different number? 30. We're moving up.
Is it 15 after the cost of capital?
It's irrelevant to the cost of capital. This is just return on your capital. What is your minimum target that I'm going to tell you? You have a defective business in the north. If you're in Canada or the U.S. or Australia, you have a defective business if your return on invested capital is below this percentage. I'm batting 1,000 on this one so far. I've not seen one yet that we couldn't get the number that I'm looking for.
Could you clarify just quickly what you mean by invested capital?
Invested capital.
I've had this conversation lots of times.
Active.
Sometimes invested in.
It's not that. This is actual capital deployed. You should have an appropriate amount of cash in the business. You should have AR, inventory, everything. No dead bodies on your balance sheet.
So in a service business, you don't have much inventory.
Right, but you'd have AR. You might have AR, but you may have some book value of equipment.
Okay.
You got some liabilities. You might get some vendor support, so you got some liability support, but not debt. This is not debt. The only thing I'll give you, the only thing I'll let you take out as debt, net, is if you have debt on a productive piece of equipment or real estate, but not AR, not inventory.
So then I'll offer 100%.
That's a very, very good answer. The minimum number is 50. So I've established that for a North American business, you need a minimum 50% return on invested capital, but the average that we see is between 75 and 100. And we're seeing some models that are even well above 100% return in today's. There's some new developments in the way models are being constructed with business. Once you understand the power of this equation, you then know what to attack in that process. And this is the part that's been hidden from entrepreneurs for years, forever, that I think we've stumbled upon by luck or whatever. But here, and part of this journey has been, we see a lot of really, really good businesses doing really, really good things that struggle economically because you make such bad decisions with your cash and your capital formation of the business. And I've looked for those things. Probably the one term that I'm most known for, the two terms that we're known for because of the book is LER, labor efficiency ratio, and the other one is core capital target. So it's our term for 2 months of operating expenses in cash with zero drawn on a line of credit. That's the number that we believe is a fully capitalized business. And so I think the development of those two terms have been instrumental in helping our clients achieve economic success because it gave them a clarity of a number to aim for rather than somebody's loose opinion of what it should be that can vary every time you talk about it. You guys need certainty. You need, here's the line, don't cross it. And when we can give you that number, you start to perform in extraordinary ways, in that process. But when you can change the rules of the game every time you sit down and talk to your team, you're going to flounder. And yet you have so much potential in that process. So let's move on and talk about this. So, let me say one more thing about this. So in terms of return on investment, do you guys know of any place that you can go invest and make more than 100% return on your money? That's legal? That is kind of the operative. Yeah, we do want it to be legal. So this helps my argument to get you to have a fully capitalized business, to get you to focus on profitability, because this is how wealth is created. Now, I want you to have a purpose to your business beyond wealth creation, but I can tell you this, purpose without profit is a dead business. Profit is oxygen. You got to have it to survive in that process. Okay? So now, where this leads into is also understanding there is a harvesting of profitability off the business, and there's a terminal event in that process. Last time I checked, none of my clients have taken their business past the grave. I'm batting 1,000 on that one. You will not own your business somehow, some way, someday. So you have to look at this issue and deal with it. Now, in looking at this, we've worked on a lot of deals, and I've been fortunate to be involved in a lot of that kind of stuff. And once again, I sit back and say, well, what did I learn from this? What's the framework that I can help people understand it and get their head wrapped around it? There's only 3 business value plays that exist. Now, if anybody has something to add to this, let me know, but these are the only 3 that I know of. So the first one is a run to harvest business. It means that you've got a profitable, you may not have a profitable business, but we're trying to get you to a profitable business, and you're going to earn the profits off of that business and build your wealth, and you better put them in the storehouse, because nobody's going to beat a path to your door to buy your business. They might give you something for it, but it's not going to be life-changing. It's not going to be the thing that will set your family up for success financially the rest of your life. You're only going to sell when you're ready to retire or start another more profitable business that has a better return on it. So that is one possibility. But typically, these are businesses that are operationally difficult to run, and they have a challenge in scaling. Now, it's your choice to scale or not to scale. I like scaling, but you don't have to scale. Some of the people that we've talked to, EO members that I've met over the years, the best thing for them to do is just be right where they're at and kind of grow and prune, grow and prune, grow and prune. That's your choice. Nobody gets to make that decision but you. So I'm not here to advocate scaling or advocate cutting or any of those things. You got to do what's best for you. And a lot of that fits in personal decisions as much as it is market conditions and those things. But at the end of the day, whichever you decide to do, you have to deal with the financial physics of that choice. You can't just wish them away. It's a harsh reality. Now, my favorite one is a harvest until premium sale. We've had a lot of clients who have built some incredible wealth from this because they are substantially profitable in what they're doing. They're going to get a premium for one reason or another based on the sale, typically a 10x or better in EBITDA in most cases. They typically have sticky customers, recurring revenue, build a skilled team that cannot be easily duplicated. That's kind of a new development in the last couple of years. We had a client in Texas that they were doing some software development on a secondary CRM platform, doing $2 million a year in revenue, losing money. And he sold his business for $2 million because somebody else could do more. He developed a skilled team. He just wasn't very good executionally of making money off of them. But somebody else really appreciated that he had talented people that were hard to get. And so he was able to sell that business and refocus his efforts on something that he actually could be more profitable at. So there are some unique situations, in that process. But this one is really great, and I'll show you a mathematical example of all 3 of these here in a second. The build to sell, the toughest one to pull off, but it happens. It's essentially, you're cash flow neutral or negative. If you're negative cash flow, you got to find a way to fund it. You either have to have your own cash or somebody else's cash. A lot of these build to sells are based on cash flow scenarios where you get paid up front and you're basically you're funding your growth operations off of deferred revenue. And we've had a couple of clients successfully build their businesses to where they didn't have to take any outside money. They were actually able to build it off of their customers' cash. So John Mullins has a great book I'd highly recommend you read, The Customer Funded Business. So it doesn't work for every industry, but if you can make it work for your industry, it's a really good technique. And it affects the cash flow of things. So here's 3 examples. The first one that I use here is a friend of mine who's actually in the senior in-home care industry. So anybody in here in the senior in-home care? Yeah, so you have caregivers that are in-home. So are you with a franchise or are you independent? Yeah. So I'll give you the free consulting advice. So we've determined 2 key numbers for senior in-home care businesses. You need a 2 direct LER, you need a 3.5 or better management LER. Other than that, the rest of the business is just you got to go get caregivers, you got to go get customers. And other than that, those are your 2 key financial metrics, and you'll actually match that financial performance with those 2 numbers, in that process. I mean, because we've done a lot of work with those companies in that industry, that with a couple of the franchises as well as some independents, and the numbers are the same for both in that process. Now, the harsh reality is nobody's beating a path to your door to pay you a premium to buy your business. And, but it's a very profitable business when run the correct way. And so you've got to look at that business to either say, how far do you want to build it in terms of adding more geography, adding bigger reach, how far do you want to grow it? And then of that profitability, if you want to build wealth, you've got to actually not consume that wealth. You've got to pull it off of the business, because this one has it has a pretty low capital requirement in terms of, if it's run correctly, you get paid pretty quickly and it turns over. So it's not a lot of float, that's involved in it. But probably, even in this case, that business is doing $5 million in revenue. We think the most that it would sell for is about 2.8, and even at that, you'd probably have to take significant terms. You wouldn't get it all up front. You'd have to take some risk in terms. What makes that business like that, it's not customer funded. Your customers are not paying for a month in advance in most cases that I'm aware of. Even though you have recurring people who are paying you, they can leave you on a moment's notice. So it's not the definition. They can leave you in multiple ways. They can expire, or they can actually just use a different caregiver. It has a high use of labor. Here's a classic Gregism, as we call them, in business. Money chases easy, entrepreneurs overcome hard. Money doesn't like this business because it has a high use of labor. Because do you have fun managing all of the people that are on your payroll? Yeah. On the holidays. But there again, what I love about businesses like yours is it's one of the necessaries. Artificial intelligence isn't going to replace that. It's going to be around. You go through ebbs and flows, as like if you have a minimum wage scale increase, yeah, that's a lot of pain and grief, but the market reprices. I mean, eventually, like I said, it's a 2 LER, folks. You got to charge $2 for every dollar you pay that caregiver at a minimum, and that's it. And if you don't get that number, that's not a good customer for you. You got to go find a different one, and it's going to do it. And it's more about the execution of that business and your ability to go market, your ability, to go sell and make those things happen, in terms of working those relationships in that process. As I said, it's not a sticky customer. That customer can leave you. They can get mad at you, for any moment. It's tough to scale because it is you don't grow in chunks. It's one case at a time. It's really easy to create. He has competitors that he'll probably have a competitor that gets a new business license here in the next hour or two. And they come and go, and they come and go. and the best ones remain because they're good. They care. They do a good job, and it's very much a reputation-based business growth model. But still, as much as the money guys would look at this business and say, these are the great core businesses that are the fabric of entrepreneurism. So don't be scared of them, just understand what goes along with it. And what you've got to do is then maximize your wealth. Your wealth building is don't be consuming that $600,000 of EBITDA to take trips and buy cars and second homes and all of those things. You got to be taking your after-tax profits and building a secondary investment, whatever that investment is, whether it's the market, real estate, another business, you name it in that process. But this is a super, really good business. So it's about a 60, that EBITDA of 600,000 to this equity number, that's their invested capital. This is a 60% return on investment business. How any of you that have $1 million, would you like to put $1 million in to get 600 a year back out? Now it's taxable, but so is everything else. But it's a 60% return. Why wouldn't you do it? That's a great business in that process. Okay? Second one of my favorites. So this one is a product business, a client of mine a couple of years ago. So here I put the value at 60 million. So here's the backstory. So client came to me. So he's doing $5,250,000 a year in EBITDA, $5 million of invested capital. So that's about 110% return on invested capital a year in that business. So he comes to me and says, well, I've been running a sale process. He's got an advisory firm. So he had 10 offers on the business. 7 of the 10 came in at 40 million. And so these guys that are advising him on the deal, that are going to make $1.5 million as an advisory fee, says 40 million must be the market value. So he comes see the chicken farmer, and he goes, well, what do you think? I say it's not enough. What do you know that these really expensive people that I'm going to pay $1.5 million to, that they don't know? I said, well, it's really pretty simple. I said, if you sell for 40 million, you're going to clear 30 million after tax. Where can you go invest 30 million after tax and make 5,250,000 a year? That's the simple question that you got to ask that they didn't ask. And that's about an 18% return, by the way. Anybody know where you can get 18% pretty much guaranteed year in, year out? It's legal? No, I didn't think so either. I said, listen, it's your business. He said, well, I don't know, I'm tired. I said, listen, you're not tired. I said, you work 15 hours a week and 14 of those are not in the office. So I said, you might be worried, but my assessment is you got a great business, you got a great team, you're in a market that, is not going to go away from any known things right now. I'd tell him no. So he goes away. A week later, he calls me back up and says, well, I got him up to 60 million. So we had an hour-long conversation. I call this my $20 million hour. So that was one of my better days of work. Now, I did get something out of this. So the good news is, and this is my plug for being benevolent, this guy was the kind of guy that when he had nothing, he'd still give you anything. He'd give you the shirt off his back. He was always helping somebody. He had a guy that ran his warehouse that he helped move out of the projects and bought him a house and just really appreciated his hard work. And this was just the kind of guy he was. And here's the thing. You don't all of a sudden magically become a giver the moment you have money. You generally become a giver because you've always been a giver. And so if you hadn't exercised that muscle, I'd encourage you to do it sooner than later. In his case, he committed to 30% of the sales proceeds to be given away to charity. Because he'd been getting that $5,250,000. He'd been in business. He'd been a client of ours for about 15 years, and we were with him from the beginning. So he'd been raking in $5 million plus a year, paying the tax on it. So he was clearing about $3 million plus a year after tax for the last 5 years of the business. He had all the money he needed. And so he committed to 30% going to charity. So by me moving the price $20 million, I basically helped facilitate a $6 million donation to charity, because of my effort. So I was pleased with that. That was a good payday. Why is it worth this? It's not customer funded, it's not recurring revenue, but it doesn't have a high use of labor. He was in a product sales business. So they had good salespeople. Very sticky customers. His product was part of a process that could be replaced, but not easy to replace. So it had some stickiness to it. It wasn't easy to get into this industry because there were some patents and patents on the products themselves. Not impossible, but there was enough of a barrier to hold people back, and which also made it his competitors couldn't just jump in right away. He had established himself as a pretty strong player in his marketplace in that process. But great business. But 11 times EBITDA. That's a good payday. And he's enjoying life since. The last one, build to sell. So I show you this one. Let's see if I can get my little thing to work here. All right, so I'm showing you $1 million of EBITDA. That number in reality was 0. So this is really, these guys were probably a big cause of my thinking in a lot of this idea of they were blowing about $1 million of expenses a year trying to scale their business and wasting it and admitting that they wasted it, because I would hold them accountable. At the end of every year we go through, all right, here's your P&L. What did you spend this year that didn't cause anything to happen, that nobody stuck a gun to your head, you didn't have to spend it. You chose to spend it. It was a discretionary choice. And it was about $1 million for the last 2 or 3 years. And they admitted readily that they spent some on development of their software. This was a software subscription client. And they admitted that, it didn't work. They were developing some stuff that the customers didn't care about, but I may offend anybody in here a software developer? Okay, safe room. Okay. Let me tell you the dirty little secret about software developers. They have a genetic deficiency. Did you know that? They are missing the gene that knows what done looks like. So every software client that we have, and they laugh cautiously when we tell them that. But it's like, listen, but it's true. They don't know when to stop. And so if you have a software project that you are having somebody do for you, you've got to manage what this done look like, because they don't know what it looks like. And they will continue forever in that process. And so these guys were having that issue. But the biggest issue that they had, and you'll love this, they were spending $750,000 a year for a sales and marketing initiative that produced 0. All of their sales were coming just from organic leads and existing customers. Yeah, they needed you. Yeah, so, and it was sad. But there again, don't feel bad for them because they sold for $40 million. They sold for almost 5 times revenue in that process. But why would somebody pay them that if they were basically making $1 million at best? Why?
Because they knew how to profitize it.
Yeah, so really it comes down to, this is a classic case of what I call a strip sale. You're stripping out the revenue down to just the pure hard costs that you need to operate. And so they were really making about $5 million a year of, if you could just bolt them on to another business that already exists and had capacity and jettison their operations, you basically had $5 million of true free cash flow in that process. And actually even better than that, most of these guys use their customers' money. They didn't take a dime of outside financing because their customers usually paid them a year in advance. Some customers paid them 3 years in advance. So they sold into the higher education. So if you want some people that don't know the value of money, just sell into the higher education marketplace if you can get into it. It's hard to crack into, but once you're in there, those people do not know the value of a dollar because they get budget. So when you're selling into businesses that live off of the word that I despise, is budget. And, excuse me. And so basically, well, we have the money allocated, we might as well just go ahead and give it to you so we don't have to write a check every month. I mean, go figure. You know, and it'd be nice to have, but they have other issues of dealing with those kind of customers. So, but that's really the reason why, because generally you had contracts that had about a 70% renewal rate on their software, didn't use a lot of labor, which was really great. Really sticky customers because these people, once they adopted a software, the only reason why their renewal rate was 70% was because any customer who failed at implementation, those were the people who didn't renew. They never missed a customer that once they fully implemented the software, you're stuck with them. They're not going to move in that process. Okay? All right, questions? Anything not clear to you? So, go back to this one. I want everybody to stop and think about your business fits in one of these three. Excuse me. So where are you at? Where do you fit? So anybody in a run to harvest business that would like to be, in a run to harvest business, the first one, that really would like to be in a harvest to premium sale. So if you want to be the example, so sure. how can we get you from here to here? Because this is one of the things that's happened in the last 10 years, more so in the last 3 to 5. There's been a lot of businesses that have moved from here to here because there has never been this much money trying to buy businesses as we are experiencing right now. It is crazy in terms of the dollars out there looking for a good business to buy. I mean, I get calls every day, emails every day asking, hey, do you know anybody that in this particular industry? So what's your barrier?
What's my barrier?
Yeah.
My capacity.
Yeah.
My capacity, because I'm a financial services business.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my main sale is my knowledge and my capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do for a living is what I say, I take people's money away from them so they don't blow it.
Right.
But that trust is created over time, and it's primarily created in me.
Right.
So that's, I'm a run to harvest. I'm very profitable.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this: Are you? And it's not to say that. Don't feel bad if you're a run to harvest business, but would you like to be a harvest to premium?
I prefer to be a harvest to premium.
Yeah, and so what you would look at doing is saying, how do I overcome this? So my business started here, and we're now here because I was in the same boat. In 2009, I'd hired my first, well, actually sooner than that. Brandon's been with me 13 years. So Brandon Gray was my first protege that I had to prove, can I teach him to do what I do? And I can safely say Brandon can do what I do, and in a lot of cases better. And so then we did the next one, then the next one, the next one. So we have 6 people on our consulting team. So I've proven that I am unnecessary to the process. So I'm a great evangelist, but at the end of the day, in terms of what happens every day, they don't need me to sit there to do planning sessions, to do calls with clients and those things. So we were able to get that out. The second thing that also helped this was content creation. So in essence, and to a certain degree, when you're trying to think of, there's a lot of people in content creation that wants to put their arms around it and put copyrights on everything. And yeah, you can put copyrights on stuff. At the end of the day, big whoop-de-doo. You know, people are going to steal it. You can't do anything about it. And just move on, and essentially the market knows who the creator generally is of unique content. And the idea, though, is just own what it is that you own, in terms of how you deal with your customers and your audiences and those things. And so as you get those ideas out there, you can create kind of a premium situation, off of that. And that's really significant. And so typically to me, harvest to premium sale, it's a 7 times EBITDA or higher. So that to me is where you cross over. Generally a run to harvest business is a 5 multiplier or less, generally a 3 to 5, somewhere around in there. But in kind of the transfer gap to me is 6, 7, but really I'm aiming for a 10. You may not always get a 10, but buddy of mine I play golf with, he had 5 tire stores. He sold for 7 times EBITDA, changing tires and selling tires on cars because a group wanted to come in and buy his 5 locations and be in that geographic area. And so he had a good strategic positioning, and there's nothing more basic than changing tires, in terms of the necessaries of the world. And what you do is one of the necessaries of the world. I mean, they can try to do AI, guidance, but hey, people want a person to talk to about their financial world. Yes, ma'am.
So is the premise still accepted that service-oriented businesses will never sell for more than 1?
Oh gosh, no. Oh no. A lot of it's not about service or product. It's about, do you meet these criteria? It's these criteria that you're trying to say, do you have a long-term relationship? Do you have recurring revenue? So like my consulting clients say, the way we work now, so the only way we take on a client is you got to come through the consulting door. So we changed our business model to say, the person I don't want to deal with is somebody who needs a tax return done. Because all of you need a tax return done. The last thing I'm going to do is when I get on an airplane is tell somebody that I'm an accountant. Because the first thing I'm going to get asked is a tax question. And it's like, dadgummit, that's the tail wagging the dog. Let's talk about making money. Taxes will take care of themselves. So the idea being, you create, so in our case, we have a planning session that becomes kind of a filtering event. It's valuable. Client may choose to work with us ongoing or not, but it's a good filter for us and for them. And then on an ongoing basis, ours are just fixed monthly agreements on the consulting side, from there. So we've kind of moved up into this sense of here. Now, we've somewhat become more customer funded because I don't give terms on those planning sessions or those monthly fees. They pay in advance in that process. And so I'm not chasing somebody down for an AR payment or those things. Now, that's not standard in the industry, but you got to put your foot in the ground and say, listen, if you want to work with me, that's the rules. And that's the process. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask, are there scope components to this? So run to harvest, are you going to see harvest the premium of $1 million businesses, or is that really only kind of happened?
Yeah, it's a good, the number has moved down dramatically. I would say there's PE money chasing $5 million businesses right now. And now you got to have something, you got to have a lot of upside potential, you got to have a story to tell, you got to show some movement and those things. But the PE money's moved way down because they've run out of people in the $10 to $20 million range to go buy. The ones that are available to buy, they've got good advisors just spouting a number that's kind of ridiculous.
$5 million in revenue, the number that comes to your mind?
Real revenue, yes. Yeah, once you cross the 5 million mark, you're on somebody's radar, if you're doing something good. Now, doesn't mean strategically that's the best advantage for you to sell at that point, because you got to look at what are your barriers to continue to grow. Because remember, all right, let's and I'll hit this slide, but it's good to talk about it now. If you're making a 60% return on investment, what do you think the power of compounding does to reinvesting into your own growth? Yeah, I like those numbers. Those are fun. And if you're at 100% return and you can reinvest those and fund your own growth, I like those numbers even better. And that's what we're seeing. But there again, that comes down to, can you sell? Can you go? And I'll tell you, the biggest challenge is actually less about selling for the really successful businesses. It's about building your capacity. We turn down more business than we say yes to, which is painful to me. And ours has been about building capacity. If I could build capacity faster, we could actually be at 10 million now instead of 5. And that hurts. So we're working on that piece of the plan. Okay? All right, so let's move forward. So essentially, return on invested capital. So it's the pre-tax profit. So this is the one thing that you'll get different from academia. So when David Wessels teaches this at Wharton, he uses public companies and uses after-tax profits. You guys are a bunch of mutts when it comes to taxes. So the easiest number to put it on an even scale so we don't get into a mess of things is pre-tax. You're going to pay tax eventually. May pay it this year because your cash basis, some of your accrual. Let's just work off of accrual-based pre-tax profit. That's the number that I want your engine working off of. Taxes are a cash flow consideration of when they will eventually happen in that process. Your investment, cash and property you contribute, sweat equity, and some of you if you're a startup, so those of you that are accelerators, if you're going without full market wage, guess what? I want you to account for that as a capital investment in your business, and I'm going to hold you accountable. If you're going without a $100,000 salary that you should be making, and your business isn't thriving because you're not able to pay yourself a salary, I'm going to challenge you and say, how long are you going to put up with that? You need to do something different. You need to get a return on your investment, whether it's salary you go without or cash that you put in. It's the same difference. For most of you, a good beginning simple number for invested capital is equity. Assets minus liabilities, with the exception of a couple of things. Do you have any dead bodies on your balance sheet on the liability side or the asset side? The number one dead body that all of you may have on your balance sheet is this account called Due From Shareholder. Anybody have that account on your balance sheet? Yeah. You know why you have an account called Due From Shareholder? It's because you have no tax basis. You've taken all the distributions out of your business. Your accountant, when at the end, they're filing your return, the cow's already left the barn, as we say at that point, and they're going, oh, wait a minute, you took distributions in excess of basis. We're going to move that to a loan. That really wasn't a distribution, because if we call it a distribution, you're going to pay tax on that now, and we're going to kick that can down the road. So let's move that to a loan. Are you ever going to pay that back? No. No, you're going to eventually hope that you're going to get profitable enough that you can clear it and you'll have basis, which if you work with us, we're going to really hold you accountable to that. But that's what I call a dead asset. That's not an asset. So you would net that one against equity. Same thing on the other side, if you put money into your business and loaned it money, that's a capital contribution. So that's not a liability. That really is capital. But other than those two, you might have some trash of related parties. So some of you, being true entrepreneurs that you are, you kind of dabble in a lot of stuff. And since your business has money, hey, I'll just take a $50,000, I'll loan that to this other new business that I'm starting up. And guess where that sits? That sits as an asset on your good business's books for this other business to fail at, unfortunately sometimes, or more times than not. But it might work. But once again, once you clean up that equity number, it really is just your pre-tax return, pre-tax profits divided by that investment. That's really all it is in that process. All right? Now, when I'm doing this on my consulting calls with a client, I make one other adjustment. Is if you're not carrying 2 months of cash in the business, I adjust that capital number for what it should be if you are fully capitalized. I'll show you what it is, but I'm not going to let you get away with showing 100% return on invested capital because you have no cash and you're borrowing on the line of credit to fund your receivables. That's a risky. I want you to be at 50% return or better if you have 2 months of cash and you have zero on a line of credit. That's the minimum performance standard from our research. Yes, sir.
Is it truly pre-tax profit, or is it EBITDA that you use as the number? I'm looking at the depreciation.
I would put real, so not tax depreciation. So it's a good point. Most of our clients, there's only a handful that really have significant depreciation, the high equipment usage kind of businesses. But I want true book depreciation, not tax depreciation that expenses things in the first year. So it would be the truly economic depreciation number. Depreciation has a real use, folks, We've just totally screwed it up with our tax mindset of things. And so there is a reason to buy a piece of capital equipment and spread that cost over its useful life. And that's the right way of looking at it. Yes, sir. Well, that's the whole beauty of the concept. It doesn't matter. Right, because that's why it's the universal principle. Doesn't matter. You know, now you may have a high capital requirement business, but that's telling you what you got to go get in profit to justify that high capital usage. And that matters. Okay? Right, yes, sir.
So sorry, just
Well, I mean,
funded. Then
well, but see, I can,
expenses are-
well, but see, if I'm a customer-funded business and I get sloppy with using my customer's money when it's really for a future time frame, that's why it matters. So I got to keep at least 2 months of that number, you know, in there. And if I have really bizarre deferred revenue things of where I collect a lot of money and I got to live off of it, we may even tweak that 2-month number a little bit in those circumstances. But those don't happen real often.
When you say 2 months, you're talking about 2 months of non-discretionary expenses.
2 months of non-COGS expenses. So all labor and all operating expenses. Anything you don't get terms on is the 2 months that we're talking about. And we'll cover that. Yes, sir. No, I mean that's the game. The game that's played is they're going to give you the money up front. They're going to stretch you on the money on the back, and the average is as if you'd have gotten paid evenly throughout the job is going to be about the same. So that's the harsh reality of if you could truly protect the upfront payment. If you're doing proper accounting, that upfront payment, I'm getting that money in cash. And then I'm booking it as deferred revenue. So I'm not recognizing any revenue. It's an in and out on my balance sheet. But most people don't have skilled people internally to do that calculation. So we just let people book it as billed, you know, in that process. And, you know, but essentially it's just part of that flow calculation. So hold that thought and you'll see it kind of come out here. We'll get in a little more detail. But just give you kind of a quick idea. If you're a startup business, so first year in business, you put $100,000 in your business. You're going to have $60,000 of after-tax profits. So you make $100,000, you pay $40,000 in tax, $60,000 left over, and you put in $100,000 of sweat equity, which means you should have charged the business $100,000 for your salary, but you didn't. So you, in essence, invested $260,000. So that's a 38% return in year one. Year two, I still got the same 100 that I put in. I didn't put in another 100. I added another 120 of after-tax profits into retained earnings. I've still got my 100,000 of sweat equity because now I'm paying myself a salary, and I was able to make 200 pre-tax, 80,000 in tax, 120 after-tax net income. So the 200 divided by 380 is the 53% return. So that's kind of the basic framework, you know, that we're talking about. Yes.
Considering franchising my business this year, so we're going to put out about $150,000 for FDDs and other issues. And so when I receive that money back on an annual basis in franchise fees and royalties, my return is 100%. My ROC,
Well, it depends on, you got to look at that and say, what is your actual cost in developing, you know, that franchise? So what are all of those costs that you had in it? I mean, obviously you operated a business, but you'd have to be a little more accurate in terms of stripping out the actual cost that the operating business incurred to help develop that franchise. You know, but in essence, those costs would be, and we'll cover this term here in a bit, it's a term I call launch capital. So these are pretty easy for you guys to understand. Oh, I put cash in. Yeah, that's capital. I reinvested my own profits. Yeah, that's capital. I created that capital, but it is capital. I put in sweat equity. Yeah, that's a form of capital. And I'll touch this in a minute, but the sneaky version of capital that you guys don't really calculate, our term that we've created for is called launch capital. Launch capital are the discretionary spends inside your business that's an expense, that's hiding in your P&L that you're using to grow the business. Nobody stuck a gun to your head and nobody made you do a franchise. You could have just kept running your business as it was. You said, hey, I could spend some money and we can create this franchise and we'll get paid by somebody else. Those things that you spend for legal fees, the time that you spent away from the business, any other consultants or other things that it took to create the franchise offering, that was launch capital.
This is a new business. My business is an affiliate. This is just
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, but you'd have to go back, and I guarantee if you go back and really look harshly at the original business, since it was the prototype, there's probably things that you spent discretionarily in that business that probably helped create the franchise. Potentially, yeah. And so if you were really doing clean accounting, you would extract those so that you're seeing the clean. So we've had one of our clients who's an EO member up in Minnesota. He had a very successful franchise that he sold. And so he ran 2 locations, but he then had 100 or so other franchises as well. And so we were able to keep a clean accountability because we used his operated franchises as the patterns of success for his franchisees. And, you could argue that they get some benefit from home office, but I mean, we had a pretty clean accountability of it, in that process. But we kept the franchise completely separate. And really from there, I mean, it really is, there are some other unique things that, we could share on franchising, from that standpoint that you got to watch out for. But ultimately the idea is what did you invest and what is that return, year in and year out. And you're right. When it works, it's a really high number on an ongoing basis. And then the question becomes, are you then building to a business value as a franchise in terms of an exit as well? Can you get to a critical size that somebody is interested in buying the franchise, from you, or is it something that you're running to harvest, the rest of your life? Both are good. Yeah.
So, when you talk about launch versus growth, if you want to expand into a new market and you've got scouting expeditions, or you are making a concerted effort to do marketing in a different way, would you still categorize some of those things as the launch
Yeah,
capital?
hold that thought. I'll give a very specific example, a case study example of that. Okay, all right, so let's move on. This is just playing with I teased you with the compounding effect. So $100,000 invested at a 50% return, it is taxable, so 40% tax, that's a high number. $100,000 invested and just reinvest the profits and you can continue to grow the business. It grows to 1.4 million almost. $100,000 invested at 75% return grows to almost $4 million in 10 years. And $100,000 invested that reinvest at 100% return grows to $10 million. That actually is how your business grows, whether you realized it or not. And you'll, in the example that proves your point, you'll see this one right here play out, except it did it in 5 years instead of 10. Okay, so I like data. So the other thing is, after Professor Wessels kind of talked me into doing my own research, so this data, these are blank years, but I'll tell you guys, so the base year is 2013, so year 1 is 2014, year 2 is 2015, and 2016. So I took 50 companies and I said, what does the data tell us? Now, these are my clients. Yeah, we have some influence to a certain degree, but these are all over the U.S., all different industries. So we didn't pick any particular one. I didn't pick the winners or losers. I just started with the first 50 that I had data on that went back to that time frame. Here's the thing that was shocking. The first thing is looking at revenue growth rate over the prior year. So 20% in 14, 14% in 15, 15% in 16. And I can tell you that those numbers for beyond there was 20% in 17, back to about 12% in 18, and it's about back up to about 15% in 19. based on our current models that are running. What was the media telling us about GDP growth during that time frame? What number did some economist model out and say, we can't afford to upset the markets?
Is that 13, 14, 15?
Yeah.
It's up 2 at like 1.5.
I mean, pick any of those 5 years, and it's somewhere between 2% and 3.5%. Maybe 4. I think the highest I've seen is 4. They don't know. They don't have this data. So this is the cool thing about EO forums. So in my Atlanta forum, we had an economist from the Atlanta Federal Reserve come visit our forum. And so I asked her, I said, hey, how do you guys get private company information? Well, our board of governors has about 10 or 15 private businesses that they call up and just have a discussion with once a quarter. Really? You provide this economic guidance and forecast based on a discussion. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, what you guys feel about your data is wrong about 110% of the time. And I'm having to coach you out of the wrong position, because usually you're thinking your business is going in the toilet because it's out of cash. And I'm going, hey, don't panic. Cash will be here next month, because here's what the model shows. You keep doing this in revenue, here's when the cash shows up, you're going to be fine. You're not going to run out of credit, you have fundability. When you're feeling good about things, I'm going, hey, I had this client call the client last week, and I said, guys, you better get your ass in gear, because you're about to fall off the cliff in May of 2020. I mean, it is, the model is just screaming at them going, and this is not something you go win work overnight in. And so it's like, I can't stress enough. I'm stressed looking at this. You better pull out plan B, plan C, and plan D in sales. This is one of those times where forget the optimum customer profile. It's called, we need some activity to create a base of sustainability, and we'll get picky about customers and contracts, after we refill this, because there's a big negative number coming. And I can give you 5 months advance warning, but you got to do something about it in that process. So this was the first thing just struck me, because I had felt this all the way back to 2009, 2010. So in 2009, the market hit its deepest point, March 9th, 2009, was the darkest day in market history. And then it turned around. And my clients weren't calling me in panic. And finally one of them called me up and says, hey, I see all this turbulence and stuff. How do I protect my cash? And that was really when I first realized that they actually had listened to me. You get this empirical, you're touching these data points, but unless you quantify them, you don't really know. And I'm going, dadgum, they actually had listened about getting the 2 months worth of cash. Because here's this, for these 50 companies, they had 1.35 months of cash, 1.7, 1.6. And this is, now some of them have borrowings on line of credit, some of them don't. This is the aggregate for those 50 companies using cash minus line of credit, if they have any. So this is the true net cash number. And as a group, they're about a 1.5 months. Which usually, if I can get you to 1.5 months, I can probably live with that. But we got some clients that are actually lobbying us. They want more than 2 months. And I go, no, that's excess cash. That cash isn't doing anything for you then, at that point. But look at the return on invested capital, 72%. 80%, 63%. Why would you invest in anything else than a privately held business? Doing something useful that the market needs. It takes skill and execution, I grant you that. But that's the power. But here's the other thing that just knocked my socks off. If I can get you to full capitalization, this shows you that they all use 40% roughly for taxes, but hear me out. These businesses are growing at a minimum of 15 to 20% a year. And they're still taking out 30% of the profits, and cash is going up. Let me say that again. They were growing at 15 to 20% a year and still taking out 30% of their profits for external consumption and only retaining about 30%. So this led to what we now call our 40-30-30 play. If I can get you to full capitalization, so if you're damaged as a business, the first thing is keep your stinking hand out of the cash cookie jar. Just take tax distributions only, but get to full capitalization. And once you're there, then I can let you run the 40-30-30 play. You can pay your taxes, you can take 30% distributions on a quarterly basis and leave 30% for growth. And then more than likely, depending on, we'll talk about capital formation here in a moment, of trade capital concepts, if you can get your capital structure correct, you may not even need to retain 30%. Your business will fund itself in that process. Now there's a handful that don't, but it's a handful. The vast majority of you do not have a cash problem to grow. You have a profit problem and you have an execution problem. But it ain't finance. You don't need outside money in that process. And if you took on outside money, one of the fun things we get to do is we have a couple of private equity firms. We get to work with them and their clients. And I'll tell you, it's hilarious what the supposedly smart money, how they come up with stuff to just, we're just going to give you another $1.5 million to just have in cash. There is no thought to the process of what they're actually going to do with it or why they would do it. Because one of our clients is up in the Northeast. They're running at over, I think they're about 124% return on invested capital. Once you strip out all the deal stuff and just do their pure capital that's actually working in the business, it's about 124% return. And I go, why did they give you extra money? I mean, it's like, what are you going to just waste it on something? I mean, and that's what a lot of the equity money thinks. They want you to spend it. And I go, why? I mean, if you need it, yeah, but I mean, most of you can grow. It is literally, like I said, about execution in that process. Okay, questions on this? All right, so let's go a little bit deeper. So let's talk about the over 5 million, because this is even more fascinating. Same data set, 23%, 14, and 16. So even higher, if you're over 5 million, it's easier for you to grow. You have more resources. You have a team of people, whether they're good at executing or not, that's going to vary, but you have more opportunity once you cross that magic 5 million mark. Look at the return on invested capital. 83%, 97, and 76. Once you cross the 5 million mark, you start to act more like a disciplined business. You grow up a bit. You might be a teenager, but at least you're out of the ravages of adolescence, at that point. Because you're learning to leave money in the business in that process. This one jumped around a little bit in terms of utilization. It still gets back to that 40-30-30 average. This group came in the year 2014 a little bit undercapitalized at 129. So, like I said, that's the number that we probably influence in terms of our philosophy. And so we said, hey, you're undercapitalized. Keep your hand out of the cookie jar. So what did they do? They only took 9% of profit in distributions. So it just took a year to go from 1.29 months to 1.86. I would say 90% of the cases that we work with clients, you're going to get fully capitalized within 3 to 6 months. There's a handful that's it's a longer project, but most of you, it's not long. It's not, you don't diet forever. Even though I'm still trying to get to 200, but I'm working on it. But it's the same concept. You just got to go without those sweets for a little while longer. All right? And then the under 5 million, you can see they're a little more volatile in return on invested capital, because this is a case where as you're trying to grow, you may diminish your profitability like they did in the third year of 44% return on invested capital, because you've got a couple of things. As a smaller business, you can't defend your position as easily year in and year out, so you're going to have more volatile profitability. But if you decide to spend any launch capital to grow, it becomes a much bigger impact on your pre-tax profit in that process. And so these numbers jump around a little bit, but it still comes back to that, that principle of the 40-30-30. And if you're a low capital requirement business, it can even be 40-40-20. So you can have 40% tax, 40% distribution, 20% retention. But every business is going to be pretty close to that number once you're fully capitalized. So takeaways, so I still believe the economy is expanding far faster than the economists have data on. They just don't have anything to base this on because we're not a public company dominant economy anymore. We think the private companies dominate. Cash is not your inhibitor of growth. Cash is available, and if it's for a good use. Most of your inhibitors are unable to build capacity. You're not confident that you can grow. So Professor Wessels, he has a great phrase that I love. And he says, if you want to scale your business, you have to change your where, not your share. So that's what I did. I mean, I was a Huntsville, Alabama practice, except I changed my where. The world is my practice. And so, I had to leave town to become an expert. And it's a lot more fun being an expert. And so you have to look at that and say, does that work for your business? Can you change your where in that process? And we found that it's a lot easier actually to serve clients remotely than it is to serve somebody in our own backyard. You're more disciplined, you have better touch points, you have better processes, in that process. So, it was a good bet. And then this one, this is the death spiral that a lot of privately held businesses get into, is the moment that you put a demand on the profits of the business over and above your compensation at a full market rate, even on the high end of market. But if you're requiring distributions to fund your lifestyle, you're on the slippery road to entrepreneurial hell. Because the business will not consistently produce profit for things that are totally outside of your control, no matter how good you are. 1 out of 5 years, 1 out of 7, it's not going to have that cash to distribute, and you've set it up to where you got to still distribute it. And so what's going to happen? You're going to use business credit resources to continue making you a distribution, and you're going to damage the business because of it, and maybe even kill it. And you've got to draw a line that says, I will not ask of the business in advance of what it produces. We had a client that was over $30 million in revenue, almost lost her business because she had this love of real estate, which is fine. You can love real estate. But she had a really good non-real estate business that was quite profitable, except it had some challenges in cash flow, and she would make real estate purchase decisions in advance of profits being created to fund them, and put those funding requirements on the business, which is totally unrelated to her investment desires of owning this real estate portfolio, until she lost her bonding and then had to really pull a rabbit out of the hat to create some tricky ways to get that capital back in the business to get her bonding back, and almost lost a really profitable business because of putting pressure on the business. Once it's there, take it out. The business is fully funded, got what it needs. But don't put the pressure to take it out, before it happens. Okay? All right, so I think we're at a good point. Let's take a quick 10-minute break, and then we'll gear into the next section after that. So.